Alright, I really hope you like long videos. Let's have a look. There we go. Well, it's been a short year, huh? Welcome back to the BioWar Devblog, and today it is nearly Christmas. That's right, everyone. I am back in the chilly December of 1947 to bring you with me on an exciting mission. You see, with the war over a month or two ago, Santa's elves have switched over from ammunition production back to toys. But, look, I'll be honest with you, Santa is not convinced all the bioweapons are gone. Now, I know, I've tried talking to him already, but the jolly man has been hitting those pre-drinks with the milk and cookies and is completely beyond reason. But here's what I'm thinking. The Allies and Soviets are still flying plenty of patrols, you know, just in case. So I'm thinking of petitioning the Soviets or the Allies to escort Santa on his trip. Keep him safe, you know. The main problem for us then, and why I need you specifically, viewer, is this. Who do we choose to escort Santa, and what plane? That's right, today's episode isn't just a Christmas one. It's also the aircraft video you were promised. So, let's dive in, take a look, and see who we could send out to help Santa. Now, before we get started, I'm going to try and make sure I stay as neutral as possible in this. No favouritism here, absolutely not. Alrighty, I'm sure you figured out I'd be doing this one first, so let's dive in and take a look at what the RAF fields in BioWar. Besides the usual lineup of aircraft, the Air Ministry and aircraft manufacturers have been hard at work to get new designs into the field. Oh, hey, it's my favourite. Based on the latest RAF Meteor designs, the Reaper 2 has modified Derwent 5 engines for greater low-level performance and fuel efficiency. Designed as an upgrade to Gloucester's in-house Reaper programme, the Reaper 2 was built to last, with space for future upgrades. These aircraft were most famously flown by the 1st Attack Squadron, including Henry Price and his wingmen. They have a fair range with drop tanks, and certainly have the speed to keep up with Santa. Produced in several variants, the de Havilland Vampire was the first of the RAF's jet aircraft to see active combat duties. With variants for multi-role use, these aircraft were a common sight during the retreat from Germany in 1945, and later during the Siege of Paris. Night fighter variants were also produced, and saw extensive combat alongside their Meteor night fighter counterparts. Of course, they're not quite as fast as an unladen Reaper 2, but perhaps the night fighter variants might come in handy later in the evening. Plus, I have the feeling Santa will like their aesthetic. Designed to replace the de Havilland Mosquito, the Canberra is the RAF's first jet bomber. Though designed to be used in a ground attack role as well as high-altitude bombing, Canberra squadrons were mostly made up of veteran bomber squadrons. Now, these bad boys certainly have some range, and when fitted with gun pods would make a decent escort for Santa. They may even be able to fit some presents in the bomb bays. The British-operated B-29s were never overly popular, with most of them relegated to special operations duties. While some were converted to launch glide munitions and early air-to-surface missiles, some were transformed into makeshift paradrop aircraft for special forces. Considering Santa's part-time role working with bomber squadrons earlier in the war, I have the feeling he may appreciate these beasts, though their ability to escort his sleigh is questionable. This beautiful aircraft was designed by the British seaplane manufacturer Saunders Roe as a rapid response interceptor to protect Royal Navy fleets. Accepted into service relatively quickly, these were rapidly distributed to Royal Navy ships with seaplane launching capabilities. SRA-1s were responsible for many aerial bioweapon kills thanks to their quick deployment times and ability to climb rapidly and meet the threat. Though rarely mentioned in her accounts, Captain Julia Argyleson used HMS Belfast's interceptor to great effect during the Korean War. With plenty of these around the globe serving with the Royal Navy, their limited range is made up for by the near-constant coverage they can provide for the sleigh, provided the ships are in the right places to launch, that is. Designed for the Royal Navy as a jet fighter, it didn't take long for the Navy to realise the Seahawk's potential in other roles. Swift and deadly, the Seahawk served on Royal Navy ships into the 1950s. Though quick and packing a serious punch, these fighters will need to return to their carrier after a relatively short time, so probably not ideal for Santa. Yet another aircraft that was turned into a multi-role fighter, the Sea Hornet. Though slower than some of its jet-powered cousins, it packs a punch. Most famously deployed on HMS Bulwark and HMS Indomitable, these aircraft saw extensive use defending the Channel from bioweapon attacks. With their powerful twin engines, Sea Hornets would certainly make a noisy entrance for our present carrying milk enthusiast, but they might well be outclassed by some of the previously mentioned aircraft. It'd be a bit difficult for me to give such a national symbol a decent description, so I'll give you a general overview. The mainstay of the RAF since the start of the war, this venerable aircraft has undergone many iterations. From changes in weapons, fuselage shape and even engines, later model Spitfires serve well into 1947 as reserve fighters. With later models having a decent range, I'm fairly certain Santa wouldn't turn his nose up at a couple of Spits turning up to show him the way. Also, being quite fast, one can assume they'd keep up with Santa's sleigh fairly easily. With plenty of these aircraft being deployed around the world, I have the feeling Santa will like the continuity. I mean, it'd be weird if we didn't cover America, right? The XF-5U is truly one of the most unorthodox looking aircraft on today's list, but I couldn't help but include it. Though never seeing service in our reality, in the BioWar universe, a small number were handed over to the US Navy and Army for evaluation. Oh, what a beautiful specimen. The FR-1 was a mixed-power fighter aircraft designed to be used on aircraft carriers, though never quite got that far. The super neat thing about this aircraft is its so-called mixed power, combining both jet engines and piston engine. Being the US Navy's first jet-powered aircraft of any kind, she certainly had some flaws. With quite a low fuel reserve, too weak an airframe for carrier duty, and a very modest armament, I probably wouldn't recommend giving Santa any of these to keep him company. Originally built for the US Navy and their long list of requirements for a new attack aircraft, this plane would go on to serve with several branches and nations. In the BioWar universe, the United Kingdom has 2 squadrons of these aircraft, as well as the French Air Force. Multiple variants were already in use by 1947, with the British favouring the side-by-side twin-seat variant. While a little slower, these variants were found to be easier to transition to for Mosquito pilots. With a broad range of weaponry, longevity of design and a long range, the Sky Raider would certainly make a decent choice for Santa's flight over Allied territory. While the US's first jet fighter to serve in the war, this aircraft served its purpose well early on in the war against the bioweapons. Eventually, and inevitably, the Shooting Stars were replaced with bigger and better fighters. With the first variants being relatively short range, it's debatable if Santa would want these following him over the Atlantic. With American jet technology racing ahead under a war footing, the Navy began to demand more of their new fighters. The Banshee is the result of this, capable in most roles and built in plentiful supply for the US Navy. These were eventually phased out with the introduction of F-9F Panthers. Either the Banshee or the Panther would make a decent choice for escorting Santa. With decent range and firepower, they would easily keep Santa safe on his travels. And built as a carrier-based bomber, these aircraft were designed with 2 main goals in mind: to flatten enemy positions and to be nuclear capable. The A-2 would greatly succeed in the first role, helping to keep the Mediterranean clear of bioweapon presence. The aptly named Savage would thankfully never be ordered to fulfil its second duty. As for its St. Nick protection capabilities, it's doubtful he'd be impressed with a squadron of these rocking up. Arriving too late to see the majority of the war, the F-9F Panther nonetheless made its mark in combat. Serving with the Allies during the last year of the war, Panthers were deployed on the US Navy's famed flying aircraft carriers. With flying airfields and a good range with drop tanks, the real question is whether the American airborne carrier fleets can get into position in time. Also known as the YB-35, this experimental flying wing bomber saw limited use during the last 2 years of the Second World War. Difficult to maintain for what were considered to be only minor gains over existing designs, the B-35s flew missions from France into Germany. As for what they could do to help Santa on his trip around the world, well, very little. Now, I know I've talked previously about some of the aircraft available to the Soviets, but let's take a deeper dive in this special episode. Why not? Designed to carry out a multitude of roles, the BE-6 represents the next evolutionary stage in flying boat doctrine. With a long range and capable of performing both combat and non-combat roles, these quickly became the backbone of Soviet maritime patrol operations. Try saying that 3 times quickly. Now, it's already questionable if Santa would really trust the Soviets to escort him, but given the fact he's wearing red and distributing free presents, I think he's safe. As for the BE-6, it would make a decent escort given its defensive armament and good range, its ability to land on water meaning it could refuel almost anywhere. Unfortunately for Santa, this thing would be abysmal in a dogfight. As the grandfather of the BE-6, the BE-4 was an early Soviet reconnaissance seaplane. Deployed mostly by ships, these aircraft had a shorter range and required more frequent stops for refuelling and, on some missions, rearming. Honestly, I don't think Santa would ever leave the workshop again if you suggested this one. A navalised version of the famed IL-2, this aircraft had much of its armour removed to reduce weight. Armed mostly with torpedoes, these rare aircraft would see limited but important service with the Soviet Navy. Sadly, the lack of armour and range on these aircraft, not to mention their slow speed, would definitely make them a bad choice for escorting Santa. Though only seeing use on the Kalinin hybrid cruiser, the navalised I-153s were modified to take external fuel tanks, doubling their range. These fighters were also equipped with Rato and RAL rockets, though these required removal of the external fuel tanks. Again, I'd only suggest these if you wanted putting even further up the naughty list. A specialised naval variant of the Yak-9 was hastily trialled and assembled to serve on board the Soviet Victory in late 1945. Including a lightweight composite construction and increased fuel capacity, this variant of the Yak-9 loses none of its performance for the increased fuel capacity. Possibly a decent choice for Santa, the Yak-9 has spread quite a bit in Europe by 1947. Range might still be an issue though. With the Tupolev jet bomber projects already well underway, a small production run of navalised prototypes were ordered by the Soviet Navy. Destined to serve on board the Soviet Victory, these heavy jet bombers were barely able to lift off, even with catapult assistance. As a result, most sorties were flown with half of their load capacity. To push these could help Santa, but I imagine they'd be better suited to present deliveries. One of the first truly mass-produced jet fighters of the Soviet Union, these evolved into many variants of aircraft to perform different roles. Quick and punchy aircraft, these would certainly make Santa feel a bit more secure flying over the treacherous landscapes of the Soviet Union. Alright, so that's a lot of planes talked about. However, it's now time for some honourable mentions. I think Santa would be pleased with some of these, were they more readily available. Though of limited use to the Americans by the time their new jet aircraft were under construction, this Corsair on steroids did have its uses. With Japan being barred from jet aircraft usage after their surrender, Allied Japanese forces were supplied with Super Corsairs for ground attack and air defence purposes. Seeing little to no action, the only time these Corsairs saw use was during the Siege of Paris. Though definitely a good choice for helping Santa across the Pacific, their noisy engines might scare the reindeer. Ah, yes, how could I forget? Practically wise for escorting Santa? Forget it. In terms of cool factor, stopping Arthur from getting mad at me for not mentioning it and its ability to troll the Japanese, this is a pretty solid aircraft. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, Arthur, how could we possibly choose? I know it's difficult. There's quite a few decent aircraft here that would make excellent escorts for Santa. Well, I think we all know which I'd pick. But which do you think would be best? Is there an aircraft of the period I haven't mentioned that you think would work better? Then let me know in the comments. Please. Alright, last off, I'd like to mention that I don't really have any updates for you today. This is because I've recorded a batch of videos in a short space of time, meaning nothing has really changed between them. Anyway, this has turned into quite a long video, or at least the script looks quite big. So I'm going to leave it there for you. I hope this was fun, and next time you will either talk about March to War, or you'll get the long-awaited Walter video. Either way, Merry Christmas.